Hello, everybody, and welcome to another MyMusic, or should I say, hello, everybody, and welcome to another MyMusic, because today we have Ashton in the studio with us, who will be talking in a low voice, like he sings, unless he manages to do a slightly higher voice. We've just been talking about that.
Yeah,
We will see.
the perils of voice modulation. We'll start with the high. This is Ashton Nyte. It's lovely to be here. And then we'll work our way up throughout the show, you know?
Oh, yes, we will.
Oh, yes.
But first, we're going to watch this little video, and we'll see what Ashton makes of it.
Keep on, don't stop. Keep on, don't stop. Keep on, don't stop.
Fabulous.
I was just reaching above my head whilst that was on, just to
stop the bus.
Pull this down.
Oh, yes, I recognize that. Yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, it is a good one, isn't it? Let's start there. How did you meet Michael?
Well, I was going to invent a really silly story, but the truth is, I was working with a young man named Mark Gemini Thwaite, who played guitar in The Mission and for Peter Murphy and various other projects, and he'd invited me to sing a few songs on a project of his first kind of solo endeavor as MGT, and the album included people like Ville Velo of Him and Julianne Regan of All About Eve and Miles Hunt of The Wonder Stuff, and then there was me, and for whatever reason, no one noticed. I snuck in at the back and I was just singing my little song. And Mark is a Schecter artist, and of course, Michael is the president of Schecter Guitars. And one thing led to another. Michael heard the album and he heard me sing. And even though he had all those other options, he chose to approach me to sing on his project, Beauty and Chaos. So... and then he threw in a few guitars to sweeten the deal, so I became a Schecter artist just like that, And in truth be told, I was already playing Schecter guitars because, of course, it's the only tool for the trade. And I have the tattoo, the Schecter tattoo on my chest. You just can't see it beneath the T-shirt, but it was a match made in heaven. And we've now released our fifth song together. So the first song we did together as Beauty and Chaos is a song called Storm. And that ended up being the first single, and it ended up being kind of a tagline, you could say, or some kind of branding for the project, which is hugely, it's a huge honor to have that be the case. And 5 or 6 or 12 or 114 years later, here we are with Made of Rain, which has just come out, and a song I'm equally proud of. It's just lovely to work with Michael and to continue this journey with him.
He seems to be. We've never met in person. We've met online now about 5 or 6 times. He seems to be one of the most genuine people out there in terms of and genuine as well about his time and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. It's as I said, I was very flattered to be invited in the first place, and it's. It took all of 3.5 minutes of conversation for us to become friends, and that's just how it's remained, And he refers to the collaborative effort as the Beauty and Chaos or the BIC family, and that is how it feels, when we've hung out many times. We don't live in the same town right now, but I've spent a lot of time in Los Angeles and still do, and we always get together, and it is always like a kind of a family affair. Especially when you include all the artists and, of course, Michael Rosen, the producer, and so on. So it's an ongoing thing and an ongoing pleasure for me.
Let's talk about your voice for a minute.
Oh, dear.
No, you've got a beautiful voice.
Thank you.
But how did you discover the voice? Because I'm sure that, people listening who do know of you will want to know that. Did you... I mean, did you just grow up listening to Sisters of Mercy, or did you, actually, did you listen to something completely different, and suddenly go, oh, actually, this suits my voice?
My
Which way around was it?
Yeah, well, first off, I think my voice never broke like, the typical teenager thing where your voice, you used to speak like that. And then one day, I just always had a deep voice. It was wonderful because I could use it to help my friends get out of doing things at school. I say, hi, this is Mark's father, and he won't be in today. That's if I was an American. I don't know why I did an American accent there. But anyway, but Mark's dad must have been American in that particular example. Yeah, it wasn't quite as deep as this. This is just, years of life draining me that makes me sound this way. My first hero was, in fact, Elvis Presley. I think the first moment, my aha moment was seeing a rerun of the 68 comeback special. And he was there in his black leather-clad glory and his, perfect face and his perfect voice. And he said, "You're looking for trouble?" And I said, yes, sign me up.
Yeah.
And that was my first love. And of course, he doesn't sing in the highest voice. So I suppose singing along to Elvis was probably the training wheels of my singing. And then
Cool.
at the age of 8, I discovered David Bowie. And he just opened everything up for me in terms of what being an artist actually is. And using singing as the entry point, but then of course all the writing and the reinvention and the theater and the cinema and all of that. And not long after that, Kate Bush, in fact, I don't sing like Kate Bush, but artistically she's also been she was kind of the female energy that Bowie was. Bowie encapsulated a lot of male and female energy, of course, but then Kate Bush just added a little bit of extra female energy to the mix for me. And those
The
are
great thing about Kate Bush, though, is if you've got a low voice, is that she's right up there.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you find it's quite interesting though? Do you actually find that if you've got a female or someone with a high pitched voice up there, that actually to sing along, that's actually easier in some ways because you just naturally gravitate towards the a lower version or
it can be,
a
and I'm so glad that you brought that up because Kate's obviously listening and watching right now, and I just want to say that I'm a natural harmony for you, Kate. At anything you could possibly sing, I could find a way to bring out the bass notes in that. And I actually heard. Speaking of beautiful female voices, I had the opportunity to sing with Julianne Regan on a project where we actually did a friend, George, has a project called Le Signoir. Don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that's what he calls it. And we did a cover of the old Thompson Twins song, Hold Me Now. And and I just did my best Tom Bailey impression, really. It was, that was good enough for me. But
what a great song.
It is. It's just, it's just, I saw you there. It was just wonderful. And Julianne does her trademark, beautiful, ethereal harmonies. And so we've been threatening to do something together ever since. And a while ago when I was up in Scotland and I was, sneaking in selfies in the Highlands because I was just so enamored with it all, I think she said, yes, that's the cover of your Celtic album, and I'll sing backing vocals. So I keep mentioning this again, so Julianne remembers. So I haven't forgotten. We're going to do that Celtic album. It's going to be beautiful. And that was a bit of a bit of a diversion, but I think it's all to do with the beautiful high singing lady voices that I'm rather in love with.
Yeah. Were you a child then? Were you a child of the 80s? Was that your musical period that you grew up in?
Yeah. I'd say so. Yeah, it's definitely made the biggest mark. I mean, it's everything else was kind of before my time, but I enjoyed, going back to this, as far back as we can find, recorded music. I enjoy aspects of it from, early blues and jazz through to Elvis, through to, everything, Zeppelin, rock and roll, Floyd, all of it. But the music that was kind of the soundtrack to my youth would be the kind of the 80s new wave stuff that was probably made the biggest impression. And they got to sing all nice and histrionically. You do it today and they look at you like you're weird, but we're talking about Thompson Twins or Aha. I mean, any of these. I mean, you think of Morton Harkett's voice from Aha. I mean, what a fantastic voice, and
Yeah.
the guy could do anything. I mean, he was amazing. Still is.
I totally agree. I think I was just going to say, I think a lot of the songs from the 80s, so much focus goes into the sounds of the, of the songs because of, that was the time when everybody went synth mad because
Right. Yeah.
suddenly synths were affordable things, you
Yeah.
know, or began to become affordable things. And everybody was out there buying a Casio keyboard or a Yamaha keyboard.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know whether you remember this, but there was a time when if you passed a Dixon's shop or whatever down the high street, every keyboard would have its demo thing being played. And at one point, it was all Wham! Last Christmas. It drove you absolutely nuts. But you do remember that, don't you? You see?
Yeah. I mean, Last Christmas, if memory serves, only lost out because of the Live Aid song, right? The Do They Know It's Christmas?
That's
I think
right.
that ended up being number one, and George Michael's absolutely beautiful classic White Last Christmas was relegated to number 2. So yes, no, I remember, and I also watched the Wham! Special on Netflix not too long ago, which is why I remember this so clearly. But it's another beautiful voice, George Michael, in my opinion.
But as you say, there was for all of the sort of beeps and noises going off in the music, and actually, the synthetic beats and everything else or whatever. Some of the singing, that whole era brought about probably some of the best singers ever, because actually singing over that stuff and conveying emotion isn't easy.
That's
And
absolutely right. I mean, if you think of, bands are, even if you think of the first Depeche Mode album and how stripped down the sound really was, down to just a bass line and kind of rudimentary.
that was Vince Clarke, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The first,
yeah. Exactly. And, so it's got that early Yazoo, Erasure feel to it. And it's really up to the singer. It's up to Dave or Martin or whoever's taking the lead to, or of course, Alison Maillet or whoever he's working with to really bring that to life. Or you're just going to go kind of Kraftwerk with it, which is another way to go. But the stuff that, but the stuff that kind of broke through to the mainstream, it was Depeche Mode, and in Europe especially. I mean, in South Africa, we had far more of a sort of British influence than I think. I live in America now, and there are here. I think a-ha known for maybe 1 or 2 songs. In South Africa, we could recite 20 hits by them, and Alphaville and Ultravox, so many bands that were synth pop oriented bands. And yeah, that is definitely the sound, along with, I mean, we were aware of rock and, obviously, but on the synth side of things, I think that really left a mark on me. And I just in passing mentioned Ultravox, but they're such a huge influence for me. And I think you can probably hear that Midge has left his mark on my vocal histrionics as well. And just a wonderful, again, taking something that is ultimately electronic in origin and making it so organic and so otherworldly almost is just, it's something I keep pursuing to this day.
And I think there were some bands around at that time as well that probably signaled the start of where music was going to go as well, because they started integrating real instruments back into that as well, and that they were always on the fringe normally. But I think of people like China Crisis, You Did Cut Me, and was it Song in the Catholic Style, that sort of thing. There's really quite intricate stuff, but with the electronics as well. Talk, for example, as well. Who ended up being much more prog, but what a great vocal that was as well. Really,
I just think it was a wonderful reset. We throughout music, you've got these resets that happen, in popular culture and in all the fringe and all the underground and all that, as you well know. And I just think the advent of the synth, it was Kraftwerk and bands like that kind of pushing the boundaries, and then someone like Bowie taking that and going, "Ooh, let's make an hour, let's go heroes with this, and let's add something else." And then by the time we got to the 80s and think these things were actually affordable, everyone is having a go. And we mentioned Kate Bush with the Fairlight and all of that, and I mean how that is the whole Hounds of Love sound, was because she got to do all of this cool stuff and not rely on $20 million worth of studio time to do it. You could now actually...
She borrowed that though, didn't she? You remember? She borrowed that.
Yeah.
She borrowed it from Peter Gabriel,
yeah.
I believe.
Good friend to have, It's, Dave Gilmour, Peter Gabriel, she's moves in the right circles, I think.
That's right. She was discovered by Dave Gilmour, wasn't she?
Yeah.
At a ridiculously young age.
Yes, ridiculously talented is our Kate, I do think.
Yeah. What actually got you into writing?
I think I've always been interested in, for starters, the written word. So I think I was drawn to writing conventional poetry and creative writing from the beginning. As soon as I could read, I'd want to tell stories. So I think ultimately I was drawn to, when music started interesting me, I was drawn to the very lyric-driven music, which is why I think Bowie made such an impact on me. Because in pop music, if you've got the locomotion on one side and then you've got, David singing heroes on the other side, you tend to notice, even as a child, I'll never forget getting my dad to buy one of the many Best of Bowie type compilations, because I'd heard it advertised on the radio as a young child, and I heard this guy singing about Major Tom, and I thought this sounded so different to everything in the 80s anyway. And on that record there was Rock and Roll Suicide, and I'll never forget hearing that for the first time, and that just the kick drum coming in the first time he says, "Oh, you're a rock and roll suicide." And it was just, to me, that kind of song is the perfect marriage of really great prose, great creative writing, great character storytelling, and music, and just what you can do with your voice and lyrical imagery. That has just always been kind of a bedrock for me. And as much as I've enjoyed rock and roll and various kind of more music genre stuff, I always come back to the singer-songwriters, if you will, and that can be Bowie, and it can go through to Cat Stevens, or it can be Neil Diamond, or people who just are able to draw us in with these stories and engage. And I think if you lack that, everything else is kind of cool and you can enjoy it for the time being. But if you don't have that hook, and we're talking about synth music, you think of even bands like Eurythmics, what she was able to do lyrically with this wonderful music that was assembled as the kind of the foundation for that. It always comes back to that. It's a lyric, it's a hook, it's an idea, it's an emotion that gets conveyed, a space that gets painted. That's always what brings me back. So, man, that was a long answer to your question. I do apologize.
No, it's great. I was being drawn in as you were explaining it. But you're right. Yeah, you listen to a line like "Here Comes the Rain Again." What a brilliant.
Yeah,
what a brilliant
falling
line.
on my head like a memory. It's just to finish it off. It is poetry, and I think so much. Coming back to the 80s, there was so much poetry in woven through these seemingly innocuous little melodies and things, and I think that's absolutely brilliant, because I can get really wordy and over the top with it all, as can anybody who's really into words. And it's finding that balance. I remember I mentioned Neil Diamond, and people are often surprised that I would speak about Neil Diamond, but he's an amazing songwriter and a national treasure and all the rest of it. But I remember him saying how he had to kind of essentially dial it back. He also started off really wordy in the beginning, and he was good at it. But once he was able to kind of distill that and focus it a little bit more, he found his sweet spot with the mainstream. And then, of course, he went more schmaltzy and all of that, and I became less enamored. But it doesn't take away from this brilliant body of work that will stand the test of time, because you can sing a great song you can sing in any shape, or you can do any kind of impression or iteration of it. It's gonna hold up. I always said, if you can sing it around a campfire with acoustic guitar, or just beating on your whatever on the rocks, then it's a song. If it relies on all of this other stuff, it's cool. It's a piece of art, no doubt. But is it really a song? I always just say to people, can you sing it in the shower? Just is it? Because then you've got that real hook. And of course, you can take that down a different rabbit hole and have the really repetitive, mundane crap that we get inundated with today. But pop music's always kind of been that way. Like extreme pop has always been kind of silly and repetitive and mundane. But there's a lovely place in the middle where you can still have pop sensibility, but write great songs like all the artists we've been speaking about. And that's essentially what I aspire to.
Yeah, I think it's unfair to say that there aren't those artists still around today, coming out today. I think there's plenty of people that are telling great stories and being very poetic, etc. I think it's harder. I think when Michael and I last had this conversation, he said, well, it's getting harder to find. And I agree with him, just because there's more noise out there.
Yeah.
And therefore it's more difficult to dial in and go,
just to be clear, I was just talking about the absolute mainstream kind of super repetitive, made for the dance floor, made for the, everybody's having a good time, yeehaw kind of stuff. That's always been around. It's just, it seems even more infantile today because they are writing it for 12-year-olds because that's their market. Cool, that's their thing, But there's, I got to see Iron and Wine a few months ago up in New York. And I mean, I got to see him just my wife and I got to see him do just a stripped down acoustic thing. It was just him in this beautiful theater up in Woodstock, close to Woodstock. And I mean, what a presence. The man's just standing there with his guitar, and it's just giant area, but filling it up with these stories. And Springsteen's another one who's able to do that. Springsteen could be, banging on a tin can and telling his stories, and it would be engaging because he's got that thing, and I'm using him as an example of someone who I came from, the late 60s, early 70s, really. But Iron and Wine is very much of the last 15 or 20 years. And I'm sure there are, I've heard Billie Eilish songs that are absolutely beautiful and absolutely engaging. And similarly, when Lana Del Rey started, I couldn't believe that we had someone with this kind of voice today, and that the mainstream was somehow accepting her. So I think these anomalies will continue to exist. I mean, it's how we ended up with Kurt Cobain. It's how we ended up with all these people through the years who somehow broke through this construct of kind of boring sameness, and they come and they go, no, let's turn it on its head and let's do something else, And I think it's super exciting. And today you've got access to all this technology that most of us didn't have growing up, and you can get your song heard all over the world. And the flip side is everyone's got the same idea. So there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of competition, but ultimately I think it's a very exciting time to be an artist. And I think there's a lot of great art out there. It's just not going to get played on Top 40 radio, but that's okay. Top 40 radio, is what it is.
And I think you're competing against not only music these days, but you're also competing against storytelling in every shape and form. That's something that's perhaps different from when we grew up, which is that, you had to be in a position to have your voice on the radio or whatever. But everybody, look at me now. Everybody's got their voice on the radio.
I'm looking at you now. It's very distracting. I'm trying to concentrate.
Thank you. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you've got access to the internet, you can put your voice out there now.
Absolutely.
You can, back in the day, if you wanted to make a radio show, I mean, you probably did it with your dad's record player and a tape player, and you'd record the top 40 and you'd speak in between, and you'd go, look, I've made a radio show. These days you'd actually make a radio show and put it out there and get an audience.
That's crazy. The thing, everything is, there's the pros and cons to absolutely every piece of evolution, I think, throughout history, So we can complain about ultimately the death of sales because, streaming killed physical and all of that. And yes, it did. And it really hurt. And I'm of that generation where I used to make a living off selling CDs. I'd make an album and go and tour it, and people would buy the record or the CD, and predominantly the CD when I was doing it. Records hadn't really made a comeback in the late 90s just yet. And to go from that to streaming being a paid service when it started, Apple, iTunes and all of that. And then one day I woke up and suddenly it was all free, and it was just, whoa. It was difficult to get your head around. However, the further you get into and you look at all the things we've just been speaking about, the reach that you've got today, the conversations like this. I mean, back in the day, it would be in some magazine in some country or a limited market, and if you didn't just happen to buy that thing for your £5 or £10, whatever it is, you would just never know that this conversation took place. And hopefully, there's moments of what we're talking about that would interest people, and they would just never get to hear it, never get to see it, never get to realize how photogenic you are, even with the shirt that you said wasn't the right shirt for today, but, they wouldn't know that I'm not actually the Lord of Darkness that's sacrificing things on the side, because some people seem to think that, so there's a lot of positives, I think, about where we're at technology-wise and our ability to not only create content, but to essentially effect positive change through what we do, because there's so much negative noise in the world at any given moment that I think those of us who try to do just a little bit of a positive thing on the side, it's nice to have. It's really wonderful to have these platforms.
And I think the currency exchange is changing as well. I mean, actually, completely off of music for 2 seconds, but where I've been today, which was a sales-based business, or sales and service-based business. I mean, we were talking about that there because I think the shift is that if you sell any product these days, the trouble is that everybody will do the same thing, which is they go and find it on the internet. They search around, they see where they can find it cheapest. They go for the lowest common denominator. Boom, get it. That suits me to get it delivered to the door tomorrow because I want it now, not next week or whatever. But because of that, we're just all having to learn to change what it is that we sell in a way, or how we sell it. So now what we're doing is we're saying, well, actually, maybe what you want to buy is you actually want to buy some of the journey, or you might want to actually buy some of the conversation, or some of the experience that goes into making that, not just that.
Oh yeah.
And artists are getting better at it. I think they're beginning to get more astute to like saying, well, okay, so you want to find out what it was like, how I wrote this thing, or what I was thinking about when I wrote this thing, or or the fact that I've literally just discovered this tuning on the guitar and how crap I was at playing with it at first. But they're sharing more than they ever did. But people are willing to pay into that because they want to go on that journey. So I think that's good.
Absolutely. And that was my cat Willow, by the way, who just introduced herself mid-conversation. She's determined to make it, her impression felt at any given moment.
It's the year of the cat.
Yeah, every year is the year of the cat in this house, Absolutely, it's what you're saying. I mean, it's the whole experiential thing is heightened now. And whilst there's a line, I don't want to follow people who are telling me what they're eating and drinking and, taking photos of every waking thought and activity. That's the other extreme, and there are those. But I think a lot of artists have figured out that, people want to connect. We are all humans, we do all have the same challenges in some shape or form. Obviously, we're not all in war-torn regions, or we're not all dying of some dreaded disease, but somewhere in the middle, we're affected by these things, and we're affected by so many other things that whether it's depression or the sadness of a loss of a loved one, or all these different things. And everybody is. And I think how I choose to tune the guitar, to bring back to what you were saying, is probably somehow influenced by something that I'm experiencing in my life. And it's wonderful to share those truths and to essentially all help each other, because that's how we grow, and that's how we ultimately, I think, make this place a little better, and maybe leave it in a better state than we found it, And yeah, I think all of that's, I think technology has helped with all of that. We're able now, with the world being smaller and all of that, I think gives us a lot of potential for positive change.
Well, just before we talk about your latest release, let's just bring that back round to Bowie, because I don't know whether you must have seen the interview that Bowie gave about that, where he was talking about the way that everything was going to go. Quite prophetic, wasn't it?
Oh yes, right, yeah. Yes, that we were just scratching the surface essentially with the internet, and I think the interviewer was being all kind of standoffish. And, I don't know what you're thinking there, sir. But it was just that thing. He just was able to see a bigger picture at the time and to extrapolate and go, actually, I think this is where it's going to go. And yes, he was absolutely correct.
Yeah.
And as artists, that's part of our job, really, is trying to forge a way forward that maybe isn't obvious to a normal consumer mindset, or whatever it is, regular day-to-day life that we have to, the jobs we have to do and the things we need to do. And he remains eternally inspiring. I mean, the quotes and things, the quote about always being a little deeper so that your feet don't touch the bottom, that quote, that's one I come back to a lot, artistically go, don't just paddle in the same safe waters, go somewhere where you're not quite able to stand, and that's where you're going to make something actually exciting. And, I try to remember things like that, it's
Well, I think Annie Lennox said about him when he died that, what he did more than anything for all of us is help us see the world in a different way than any of us saw it, which is the mark of a great artist, isn't it?
Absolutely. We're talking about
different.
Yeah, we were talking about androgyny just before we started the interview. Talking about Brett Anderson and Suede and being ultimately one of many artists influenced by Bowie, but it's unfair to relegate them and say that they're Bowie wannabes or Bowie clones, any more that every single band who picked up a rock and roll guitar is a Rolling Stones clone. I think we all pay homage to those who have influenced and inspired us. Yeah, they were fans. Yeah, but I think it's great. I think it's great to wave the fan flag. I think a lot of people pretend that they've never heard these things that they sound like. You can get a band, like you said, was I always listening to the Sisters of Mercy? No, not from birth, but from my teens, yes. And you can probably hear that when you listen to The Awakening. It's no great mystery. I love Bauhaus. I love Sisters. I love The Mission, who I've got to work with and tour with and all that. And so many other bands, and then of course Ultravox and Aha and Alphaville and all those synth pop bands that we were talking about. It all goes in, and it's quite okay to admit it. You're not admitting anything; you're just confirming what people probably already know. And I think it's a troll kind of behavior to say, oh, that's a Bowie wannabe, or that's a guy wants to be Morrissey or whatever. It's. Oh well, there's probably a handful of bands who are genuinely emulating something to a T where it's kind of embarrassing. But for most of the rest of us, we are just fans of music, and it's gonna come through. And you're gonna go, oh look, that's my Dave Gilmour solo I just threw in there. It's a kind of homage to someone that I grew up really respecting and admiring, and still do. So. Yeah.
So tell us about the new album. So we've got a song off the new album. Is it coming out, or is it out now?
Yeah, the song is called Mirror Midnight, and we released the video 2.5 weeks ago. Well, I don't know when this show's coming out, so we released the video in early September, and it just broke 100,000 views in less than 3 weeks. So
that's brilliant.
Yeah, I just saw that just before we started chatting, and as a very independent artist who pretty much does it all himself, it's very encouraging, and just what else can I say? It's very encouraging. It's wonderful. People still care about what I do, and maybe some new people too.
When are you looking to put the album out?
The album comes out on October 18th. or the 18th of October for those in the UK and Europe.
Yeah, we like to do everything the wrong way around. Yeah,
Which no, it's how I've always written it. Again, coming from South Africa, we wrote things the English way around, and I've had to adjust and say October 18th, man. But yes, it's the same date both ways, and that's the full record. It is in fact the 12th album by The Awakening, and it is self-titled. I felt that. I'm just going to tell you why, because that's exactly what you're going to ask. Why, Ashton? Why wait until you put out 12 records before you make it a self-titled record? Well, Graham, the thing is that I'd kind of gone on a few departures before this, not just with solo work and collaborations and things, but even when COVID happened, which I'm sure you'll vaguely remember this thing, COVID, it had a small effect on mankind. And I had just written an album called Waiting for a Voice. It was a solo album that I was and still am very proud of. And with that, I wrote my first book of poetry and short stories and all the rest of it. And that was wonderful. And I had these illustrious ideas of going on book tours and all sorts of things, as well as music tours. And of course, the album came out in early 2020. And yes, so all of that got kind of put on hold, and the creative spark kept sparking, and I kept creating new things. But as COVID raged on, I tended to, I guess, go a little bit more left field with some of the things I was doing. So as The Awakening, I went very electronic with an album called This Alchemy, and then went the complete opposite direction, clearing out all the vaults of the heavy stuff or The Passage Remains. And I did another solo record with another book called Autumn's Children. And then, it seemed like the world was safe to go on tour again, and not just safe, but things were working again, and we were able to do what we love doing. And I just found myself listening to a lot of the records and artists that got me to do this in the first place, inspired me in the first place, in terms of the gothic dark wave sound of my personality. And before I knew it, I had what was going to be a quick little EP turned into 30 songs, and now I need to figure out how to get it onto one record. So it ended up being 12 songs, and it really felt like coming home. It felt like it was all just it happened so organically and naturally and quickly that it felt like, let's just call it The Awakening. This is what this is. It's not only celebrating my influences in probably the most blatant way that I ever have, it was celebrating the effect it had on me and this thing I'd created as The Awakening. So in ways it was celebrating the whole gothic, dark wave, post-punk, all of that, and the fact that it led me to do what I'm probably best known for, which is The Awakening. And I became kind of a fan of The Awakening again in the process, and made a record in that mindset. So it's weird how it all works out. And that just felt like, let's make it a self-titled record that makes sense, and put the emphasis back on the fact that this is indeed The Awakening.
That makes sense. It makes an awful lot of sense. It's like the bus has done the circuit and come back round again. Yeah.
Yeah, and in the process, the bus has got a few new coats of paint, and it's had a few tune-ups, and it handles the road a little better now. It's not quite such a bumpy ride.
It's learned as it's gone on its journey.
Yeah,
which is great. What are you actually hoping to tell people with this record?
With this record specifically, I think it's about the freedom of self-expression, because as I was saying a moment ago, it is probably the most blatant celebration of my own influences and things, and I think there's a very liberating feeling that goes with that, without trying so hard to be the consummate artist or to be so fiercely original or whatever it is in your life, whether it's to be the best and the most profound and the most original in your space. Whilst that's admirable, it's pretty damn exhausting and actually unattainable. Do
you actually think that's quite a pertinent message for 2024? Do you actually think that too many people, although they talk about authenticity, actually aren't being authentic, because what they're trying to be is what people perceive they ought to be as
Authenticity,
authentic.
yes. Absolutely. And I think the modern world puts so much pressure on us to be, to be so great and so special and so unique and all that. Because even in the messages that pop music's putting out, and even as inane as it might seem, there's a certain standard that is essentially suggested, and people just feel excluded, I think, more and more. And it's that whole thing of feeling lonely in a crowd. I just think that's the world we tend to be perpetuating, is this supposed mass party where we're all blah blah whatever, but it's actually people feeling more isolated, more disconnected, higher rates of depression, higher rates of suicide and divorce and alcoholism and drug addiction, all this stuff. And we just, the message is kind of like, it's okay to be you. It's a really, you don't have to be very complex with this stuff. It's just, be kind to each other, be kind to yourself, to take a moment. It's the first song, Mirror Midnight, is just, it is singing about, or writing about, and addressing this kind of perceived obsession of the self, but the obsession of the self is entirely fed by the media and by social media and by how we respond to these things and all these divisive messages, and then we become more essentially self-obsessed because we have these tailored little stories and this alternate reality where we live, where everything we do, we've got a perfectly photoshopped face in our Instagram, and we've got all of that, and the world just goes up in flames around us, and we're just, mirror, mirror. And that's what that song's about, and it's just essentially it's social commentary, but as the artistic, I should say the message of the album in and of itself is ultimately self-acceptance and the ability to express yourself, in whatever shape or form that takes, and a bit of love and compassion for yourself, because it's lonely.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult for people, because I think actually, a lot of the potential barriers, seemingly have been broken down, but actually there's more of an open world to judge. Yeah. And I think it's more a case of, I mean, when we were growing up, there were certain things that if you were this or you were that or whatever, you wouldn't talk about it. You wouldn't admit to it. You wouldn't say, oh, well, right. I think this about that. And it was almost like, and that was the problem. We almost felt that was the problem. So now what we've done is we've kind of opened up and we've said, oh, it's great that people, let's be inclusive. Let's be really open about, let's bring people in. But now, we bring people in, but at the same time, as you say, especially on social media, etc., we then judge them. And it might not be that we won't say anything necessarily un-PC about them, but we'll judge them in a different way. We'll say, oh, okay, look at that. They're not wearing the right clothes, or they're not.
And there's that thing where you're then not that enough. It's like we create these new tribes.
Enough of that, right? Yeah.
So now it's like, you talk about. Annie Lennox saying Bowie helped us to see the world differently, and you think of the androgyny and the addressing sexuality and bisexuality and all these things that just were never openly addressed, and as you're saying, that was a perceived barrier at the time, and it was a barrier, and you think of all of the prejudice and the homophobia and all of that was seemingly more rife then, but it's just as rife now, but in different ways, because then you have different subgroups that develop from every side and from every angle, and sometimes the banner of inclusivity is being waved, but in actual fact you're just not enough of X to really fit in with this clan, and enough of Y to fit in with that clan, and that's really the message I was talking about early on with this work and my work in general, is that you are enough. You really are. It's You don't need to go these extra 15 steps or subscribe to these things or openly condemn or condone these things, because there's so much of that, especially in America where I live, where it's like, that's left or right, man, and that's it. And if you're one way, you have to subscribe to this checklist of 20 or 30 or 50 or 100 things, and if you're the other way, same thing, but a different list. And I just don't think that's how most of us are. We tend to have a blend of ideas, and we're more this way on some topics and more that way on others, and some things are really important. And you've got a small group on each side that are really extreme, and we call them extremists for a reason, and they tend to do pretty crazy things. The rest of us human beings are not really interested in being super extreme about something. We're interested in something that feels a little bit more like natural and less contrived. And again, you are enough to be in the space, whichever way. And you're not an awful human being if you feel more strongly about these topics and less strongly about those topics. It's just our human nature, and love and kindness.
I think that's a
goes
really
long way,
important. I think that's a really important message for 2024 going into 2025. I also think that along with that as well, we need to give people space to change as well.
Absolutely.
I think part of that is accepting that it's okay if people change their minds about things.
Absolutely. Even 4 or 5 times in the same day, it's really okay, And I think when you talk about how our online presence and all of that, I think there's so much pressure into, especially with young people. I see, feeding the Instagram feed, and they're no sooner arrived at a vacation destination, and they're taking all these photographs so that they can, I don't know, some imaginary friend is going to think, oh wow, you're amazing because you're having cocktails on the beach or whatever. I mean, just have the damn cocktail on the beach, if that's what you're about, and know that it's okay if you don't feel like doing that, if you don't feel like getting dressed up for the thing, or if you do, that's also okay. Don't judge someone for wanting to have a fun time and take their photograph and do, it's just that. It's just, I think the need to judge and pigeonhole is so destructive, and it's so prevalent, and you just need to spend 2 minutes on YouTube and you're reminded of all these, strong opinions out there based on, I'm not sure what, just, their own ideas. And, yeah.
Well, we've put the world to right, Ashton. Thank you so much.
I'm not sure we won't really have anything to talk about next time now that everything is right in the world. And
well, I'm sure we will. Thank you so much for joining me today. So the album's out 18th of October.
Yes.
The album title is
The Awakening.
The Awakening.
Yes, by The Awakening.
That might confuse a few people. It's not complicated, all right? You don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. Just keep yourself, keep your mind open to that. The fact that you've got an album with the same title. All right? It's not the greatest hits package, by the way, just for anyone that gets confused again, because sometimes when you call an album the band name or the project name, people think it's a greatest hits. It's not. It's all new material.
It's all new. I wrote it all. It's all original.
It's all for you. And we did really well. Your voice maybe dropped a little bit lower during all of that.
You think so?
Maybe I think so. I think so, because that's what happened. Yeah, have you ever done when you're watching feature films and they do that voiceover at the beginning? You do that? Do you sit and do that?
Yeah,
coming soon to a cinema near you. Yeah, you do.
That's exactly right. The world is on fire, and only one man can. Yeah, it's always one man. It's I have done a little bit of radio work, and where you go, and in South Africa they used to get me in to do these sound-alikes. So I guess it was to save money, so you didn't have to pay the full royalty. So
the actual person,
you get me in to do Iggy Pop or whoever, and it wasn't a huge stretch for me to do Iggy Pop, and then the more I did, they would start going, oh, maybe you can do Michael Hutchence of In Excess. And I thought, nah, it never happened. And then you end up doing it, and it's just this, the sound-alike thing's wonderful. It's like acting, so you just kind of get into it and you find the nuances of that person's voice and enjoy it. So stand by. Maybe there'll be
a sensation for you.
It was indeed a new sensation. Yeah.
So if you need Ashton, if you need him tonight,
Just don't change. Yeah. Yeah.
Then you know who to call. Oh,
Yes. Yes.
Batman. I bet you
Yeah.
could do a good Batman. Would you play Batman if anyone offered you that part? That'd be great, wouldn't it? Batman in
You
a
have to talk like that the whole time. Yeah, because he's I'm Batman.
in a dramatized thing that would be quite cool. I think
I could be like an operatic Batman. Like take Batman in a different direction. Like I'm Batman. I mean, it could be quite cool.
Batman the musical. What a great idea.
Batman the musical. Yeah, there's a lot of. I mean, we just got the Penguin now, so I mean, I think it's the time to find yet another Batman spin-off. We've got the Joker and the Penguin out there. Yeah, so
yeah, there we go.
Batman the musical.
Ashton, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed that conversation, everybody. If you did, then it's MyMusic, and you know what to do. You need to go and check out Ashton's music, and play that, and make sure you stop and actually talk to Ashton on the social media as well, and let him know how much you enjoy it. If you haven't enjoyed today, sorry for wasting 50 minutes of your time. You know the drill by now. You can get that back. We've recently discovered that if you go to a fleet company just off of the service station at Hook in the UK, you register your car details and you fill in the E25 form, you will get your full 50 minutes back.
That's
there you
fantastic.
go.
Yeah, wow.
It's brilliant. I don't know how it works. Don't ask me, but people need to know that sort of thing for legal reasons. Until next time, I hope you've enjoyed another conversation with MyMusic. Bye for now.